Can I sit with you?
My mom said lonely people should never eat alone.
A bowl of soup for Walter. Put the rest on mine.
Daniel, you make a habit work to double today.
Only when they're hungry. That's not a financial plan. A worn jacket, a sweet child, a sad story. I've seen this scam before.
My dad doesn't ask anyone for money.
Let it go.
Mom said truth is for when lies get too loud.
It was you?
It was never supposed to be about me.
For 22 years, I searched for the person who saved my future. Tonight, I found him.
A billionaire does
Not kneel before a diner worker.
Thanks for watching. Follow A Brighter Destiny for more powerful stories, and don't forget to subscribe.
Duluth, Minnesota, 6:52 p.m. The temperature outside had dropped to 11 degrees, and the wind coming off Lake Superior was cutting sideways through the streetlights. Snow moved in thick, uneven sheets, and every window on 3rd Avenue had fogged over from the heat trapped inside. Somewhere past the harbor, a foghorn sounded twice, low and patient, like it had said the same thing every night for 30 years. Inside the Lakeview Diner, the air smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease, and the radio behind the counter was playing something old and staticky that nobody had bothered to change in years. A television bolted above the pie case was muted, but the caption underneath still scrolled the same headline it had scrolled all afternoon. Victoria Sinclair arrives in Duluth for tonight's Sinclair Vision Gala. At the last booth by the window, under a light fixture that buzzed faintly every few seconds, Daniel Hale sat across from his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. They were splitting one plate of scrambled eggs and toast, cut into 4 careful pieces, because that was how far $4.75 stretched on a Tuesday night. Daniel's jacket had a tear along the left elbow that he had mended twice with the same spool of black thread. Lily's mittens didn't match. One was blue with a snowman. The other was gray, borrowed from a lost and found box at school 3 winters ago and never claimed. Between them sat 2 glasses of water and a small dish of ketchup, rationed like it might run out before spring. The bell above the door rang and the wind followed it in. A woman stepped inside wearing a long charcoal coat that had gone dark at the shoulders from melted snow. Her hair had come loose from whatever style it started the day in. Her eyes were the kind of tired that no amount of money could smooth over. She stood near the entrance for a moment, scanning the room the way people do when they are looking for something they cannot name out loud. "Not this table, Miss Sinclair," said the man behind her, his voice pitched low, the tone of someone used to being obeyed in rooms much larger than this one. "There's a private room reserved at the Radford Hotel. The press pool is already forming outside." This isn't the image we planned for tonight. His name was Preston Cole, and he had worked for Victoria Sinclair for 6 years, ever since her company Sinclair Vision Technologies had gone from a rented office with bad heating to a name printed on 3 buildings in downtown Minneapolis. He wore a wool coat that cost more than most of the diner's monthly rent, and he carried himself like a man who believed image was the only currency that mattered. Victoria did not answer him. She was already walking toward the last booth. "Can I sit with you?" she asked, her voice softer than the room expected. The diner seemed to hold its breath collectively. A fork paused halfway to a mouth at the counter. A trucker's coffee mug froze an inch from his lips, and Nora Bishop, the waitress, stopped mid-wipe on a coffee stain she had been working on for the better part of 10 minutes. Daniel looked up slowly. He did not see the net worth. He did not see the headline scrolling above the pie case, or the cameras waiting outside in the cold. He saw a woman standing in wet shoes, trying very hard not to look lonely. "It's just a chair," he said. Lily slid out of the booth before her father finished the sentence, pulling the seat back with both small hands. "You can sit here," she said. "My mom used to say lonely people should never eat alone." Victoria blinked once, and for a fragile second, the woman who had once addressed a Senate subcommittee without flinching looked as though a child had reached into her chest and touched something old and bruised. She sat down carefully, as if the cracked red vinyl beneath her mattered more than the velvet chairs waiting at the gala. "We only ordered 1 plate," Daniel said, calm and entirely without shame. "But there's enough if nobody finds smaller bites." Preston gave a short laugh, thin and humorless. "Sir, do you have any idea who you're speaking to?" Daniel didn't answer him directly. Instead, he slid the better half of the toast toward his daughter, then looked back at Preston with the kind of steadiness that made most arguments lose their air. "A hungry person," he said. "That's usually enough information." Victoria studied him for a moment longer than the exchange required. His hands were rough, marked faintly along the knuckles from years of manual work, But there was something in the way he held them, a stillness she recognized from somewhere she couldn't quite place. Elves. It reminded her of 2 letters she had kept folded in a drawer for over 20 years, signed only with initials. Elves. DH. She had come to Duluth chasing that signature. Elves. She had followed it through burned records, a defunct scholarship office, and one water-damaged ledger recovered from a storage unit outside Superior, Wisconsin. Elves. She had not expected to find it sitting across a diner booth, wearing a jacket held together with black thread. Elves. 22 years earlier, a 12-year-old girl named Victoria had lived in a state group home in northern Minnesota with a roof that leaked every March and eyesight that was failing fast enough that teachers had started seating her in the front row without saying why. Elves. She owned 2 sweaters and 1 pair of shoes with cardboard tucked into the soles. Elves. She had no family with savings, no name that opened doors, and a fear large enough to carry like a second backpack. Elves. Then, without warning or explanation, envelopes began arriving, never large. Elves. Sometimes $18. Once $2,743, the amount that eventually covered the surgery that let her read a chalkboard again. Elves. Each envelope came with a short note, always in the same handwriting. Elves. You are not alone. Keep reading. The world will need what you see. Elves. She built an empire on the vision those letters helped her keep. Elves. Sinclair Vision Technologies now held patents in 6 countries, and its foundation had put reading glasses on 11,000 children across 4 states. Elves. But long before the awards, before the profiles in business magazines, there had been a stranger's signature on the bottom of a receipt, and a promise she had never stopped trying to repay. Elves. Back in the booth, the bell above the door rang again, and a gust of cold slid through the room like an unwelcome remark. Elves. Daniel rose without ceremony and crossed to the entrance, pressing the door shut against the wind. Elves. Outside, an elderly man named Walter Higgins was struggling to pull his coat tighter, his boots sinking into slush at the curb. Elves. Daniel glanced at him, then at the nearly empty tip jar sitting by the register. Elves. He didn't sigh. He didn't make an announcement. He simply took the last $5 bill from his own pocket, folded it once, and pressed it into Nora's palm. Elves. A bowl of soup for Walter, he said quietly. Put the rest on mine. Elves. Nora looked at him with the tired affection of someone who had watched him do this more times than she could count. Elves. Daniel, you already worked a double today. Then I've got enough to share, he said, and returned to the booth as though nothing at all had happened. Elves. Preston watched the exchange with narrow eyes. You make a habit of feeding strangers? Elves. Only when they're hungry, Daniel said. That's not a financial plan, Preston replied. Elves. No, Daniel said, brushing snow from his sleeve. It's just a human one. Elves. The words settled over the table with a quiet weight none of them acknowledged out loud. Elves. The overhead light buzzed once more, catching the fine lines near Daniel's eyes and a faint burn scar along his left wrist. Elves. Beneath his collar, a thin chain held a wedding band that had not left his neck in 3 years since his wife, Rachel, had passed. Elves. Some promises, it seemed, did not leave when people did. Elves. The town knew Daniel as the man who drove a blue pickup with one rusted fender, who rented the small unit above the laundromat on 6th Street, who packed Lily's lunch in brown paper bags, and walked her to school when the truck refused to start in the cold. Elves. What the town did not know was that every month, in good months and lean ones, Daniel mailed a small envelope to a scholarship office 3 states away that had changed names twice in a decade. Elves. Sometimes the envelope held $40. Once, after Lily had the flu and the heating bill ran high, it held 4 $1 bills and a note that read, "For someone who needs tomorrow." Elves. He never signed his full name, only 2 initials, D. Elves. H. Lily had asked him once back in October why they helped children they would never meet. Elves. Because your mother believed one child helped at the right moment could grow up and become a miracle for someone else, he had told her, counting quarters at the kitchen table. Elves. Lily had considered that seriously, then pushed 3 coins from her own jar toward him. Elves. Send these 2, she'd whispered. Maybe somebody needs a little miracle. Elves. Now, sitting across from Victoria Sinclair, that same child tore a corner off her napkin, folded it twice, and set the small paper heart beside Victoria's coffee cup. Elves. Your daughter is very kind, Victoria said. Daniel looked at Lily, and the tiredness in his face softened into something close to grace. Elves. She had a good teacher, he said. He nodded once. Elves. And life. Life teaches you if you let it make you soft instead of hard. Elves. Preston checked his phone, already calculating the damage this unscripted dinner might do to tonight's press coverage. Elves. But Victoria wasn't listening to him anymore. She was watching Daniel lift his glass of water and quietly slide the last bite of toast toward his daughter, as though dignity wasn't something a man announced, but something he practiced when no one important was supposed to be watching. Elves. Sophie No Lily pulled a sketchbook from her backpack, the corners soft from handling. Elves. Do you draw often? Victoria asked. Every day, Lily said, brightening. Elves. Dad says drawing is how quiet people talk. She talks plenty without it, Daniel said with a faint smile. Elves. That wasn't a complaint, Lily added, already flipping pages. Snowmen, school buses, a dog with wings. Her mother sketched as a star above a small apartment building. Elves. Then she stopped on a page Victoria wasn't ready for. Elves. It showed a grand ballroom filled with people in fine clothes. Elves. Every chair at every table was occupied except one, at the edge of the room, where a woman in a long coat stood with her hands folded, as though she'd forgotten how to ask for anything. Elves. In uneven pencil at the top, Lily had written, "The lady with no table." Elves. Victoria's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Why did you draw her? Elves. I saw you on the news last week, Lily said, suddenly shy. Elves. Everyone was clapping, but you looked like nobody was sitting with you. Elves. Preston shifted, uncomfortable. That's quite an imaginative interpretation. Daniel didn't look at him. Elves. He looked at Victoria instead. Children notice what adults edit out, he said. Elves. The sentence landed gently enough to hurt. The bell rang a third time and two photographers stepped in from the cold, shaking snow from their coats. Elves. Their cameras rose almost immediately. Miss Sinclair, is this part of tonight's event? Elves. Preston straightened, recovering his professional smile. Just a brief community moment, he said. Elves. Nothing official. Silly slid out of the booth before her father could stop her. Elves. It's official to me, she said, chin lifted despite the tremble in her voice. Elves. He feeds people when nobody's taking pictures. A flash went off, white and sudden. Elves. Daniel closed his eyes for half a second, not from fear, but from the old exhaustion of being seen only when someone needed a headline. Elves. Please, he said, lifting one hand, not toward the photographers in anger, but in quiet refusal. Elves. Not my daughter. Something in his voice made even the men with cameras lower their hands. Elves. Preston leaned closer to Victoria now, his voice dropping into something sharper. Elves. Then prove me wrong, he said to Daniel. Tell us why you're really sitting here with her. Elves. Because she asked, Daniel answered. That was all. No defense offered, no wound displayed for sympathy, just the truth, plain enough to embarrass the complicated. Elves. Preston laughed once too sharp to be casual, a noble single father. Elves. A worn jacket, a sweet kid with a sketchbook. Forgive me if I've seen this script before. Elves. Men like this know how to sit close to sympathy. Elves. They offer toast and eggs and say humble things. Then a week later, there's a fundraiser, a medical bill, a quiet request for help. Elves. Lily's face went red. My dad doesn't ask people for money. Elves. Sweetheart, Preston said. Adults are complicated. Daniel's hand covered his daughter's small fist before anger could teach her the wrong lesson. Elves. Let it go, he whispered. But he's lying, Lily whispered back. Elves. Then say something, he murmured. Daniel looked at Preston, then at the room pretending not to listen, then finally at Victoria. Elves. Everyone has a hard story, he said. Not everyone uses it to buy kindness. Elves. And not everyone who looks poor is trying to sell you their pain. Elves. A few eyes dropped around the counter. Nora stood frozen with the coffee pot still in her hand. Elves. Victoria's breathing changed. She had heard wealthy men insult competitors before. Elves. She had heard board members reduce children to line items in a quarterly report. Elves. But this was different. Preston wasn't attacking a business strategy. Elves. He was attacking a man's dignity, and the man had simply refused to hand it over. Elves. Lily disappeared toward the back staircase before her father could stop her, her boots thudding up the steps like a small, determined heartbeat. Elves. She returned 2 minutes later carrying a dented blue tin box with faded painted daisies on the lid, holding it with both arms, though it couldn't have weighed more than 3 pounds. Elves. Sweetheart, that isn't for this, Daniel said, his voice catching. Elves. Mom said truth is for when lies get too loud, Lily answered, already prying the lid open with trembling fingers. Elves. Inside were folded receipts, church bulletins, and a bundle of letters wrapped in a faded ribbon. Elves. On top sat a newspaper clipping, yellowed at the edges, a photograph of a thin 12-year-old girl standing outside at a group home after eye surgery, smiling like hope was something she'd just been handed and didn't yet trust to keep. Elves. Victoria's breath caught. She knew that photograph. She had carried a copy of it in her own coat pocket for 22 years. Elves. She reached for one of the letters. The handwriting moved through her like a song remembered from a dark room. Elves. You are not alone. Keep reading. The world will need what you see. Elves. At the bottom, 2 initials. She opened a receipt. Elves. The line read Daniel Hale. The amount, 2,743 cents. The date matched the exact winter she had nearly withdrawn from school because she couldn't afford new lenses. Elves. It was you, she whispered. Daniel looked away not from shame at giving, but from the discomfort of being found. Elves, it was never supposed to be about me, he said quietly. Elves. The diner went completely still. Even Preston said nothing. Victoria held the letter to her chest, and the woman who owned buildings across 4 states stood in a small-town diner with tears in her eyes, staring at the man who had been carrying her future in a blue tin box for over 2 decades. Elves. 27 minutes later, the ballroom of the Radford Hotel glowed under 3 chandeliers, its tables dressed in white linen, a string quartet warming up near the stage. Elves. Outside, the snow kept falling over Duluth, but inside everything was warm, polished, and carefully arranged. Elves. A banner behind the podium read, "Every child deserves to see the future clearly." Elves. Preston moved through the room adjusting seating cards, his professional calm reassembling itself, piece by piece. Elves. He had built tonight around a clean narrative. Visionary founder returns to the Midwest to expand access to children's eye care. Elves. Inspiring, safe, useful. Then Victoria walked in with Daniel and Lily beside her, and the room lost its script entirely. Elves. Conversations thinned, heads turned. Preston hurried over, his smile stretched thin enough to crack. Elves. I placed Mr. Hale at a side table, he said under his breath. Elves. Walking in together sends a complicated message to the donors. Elves. Daniel stepped back immediately. I can wait outside, he offered. Elves. Lily grabbed his sleeve. Victoria didn't raise her voice. He walks with me, she said. Elves. This isn't strategy. It's honesty that ended the discussion. Victoria stepped onto the stage as his applause rose politely, the kind of applause reserved for people expected to deliver comfort without discomfort. Elves. She stood behind the podium a moment, looking out at faces that had come for charity without confession. Elves. Preston stood near the curtain, holding her prepared remarks on a tablet. Elves. She glanced at the first line, then turned the screen face down. Elves. When I was 12, she began. I could barely see the letters on a classroom chalkboard. Elves. I lived in a group home with a roof that leaked every March. Elves. I had no family with savings, no name that opened doors, and no particular reason to believe the world was waiting for me. Elves. The room went quiet. Then someone I'd never met started sending money. Elves. Not much, by the standards of this room. $18 here. Elves. 40 there once, $2,743. The exact amount that paid for the surgery, that let me see clearly for the first time in years. Elves. Every gift came with the same handwritten note. You are not alone. Elves. Keep reading. The world will need what you see. For 22 years, I looked for the person who wrote those words. Elves. She lifted her eyes toward the back of the room, where Daniel stood near a velvet curtain, trying to make himself smaller than he was. Elves. Tonight I found him. Every head in the ballroom turned. Elves. Hundreds of eyes settled on the single father, who less than an hour earlier had been mocked in a diner booth for the crime of being poor and kind at the same time. Elves. Daniel didn't move. He didn't smile. He simply rested one hand over his daughter's, as if reminding himself that recognition was just another kind of weather to stand through. Elves. His name is Daniel Hale, Victoria said. He is not a marketing story. Elves. He is the reason I am standing on this stage tonight. Elves. For the first time all evening, the ballroom was not impressed. Elves. It was silent, and the silence lasted far longer than applause would have. Elves. Preston intercepted her as she stepped down, his whisper sharpened with panic. Elves. Don't do this, Victoria. Thank him. Hand him a plaque. Elves. Let the room clap politely and move on. Move on from what? Elves. She asked. From the embarrassment, he said. Whose embarrassment? She asked again. Elves. A founder doesn't build credibility by kneeling in front of a diner cook, he said. Elves. Her expression changed not with anger but with a disappointment deep enough to make anger unnecessary. Elves. A human being builds character, she said, by knowing when she should. Elves. She walked past him, crossed the ballroom floor, and stopped in front of Daniel near the back wall, beside an empty chair that had no name card and no view of the stage. The kind of chair a room places for someone it doesn't know how to honor. Elves. Can I sit with you? She asked again. This time in front of every donor, every reporter, every camera in the room. Elves. Daniel stared at her, and for one breath the years folded together between them, the group home, the letters, the diner, the blue tin box, the shame, and now finally, the grace. Elves. You already did, he said. She sat. Not on the stage, not beneath a banner with her own name on it, but in the back row beside a man who had spent 2 decades sending strangers a promise he never expected to be repaid. Elves. No one clapped at first. Some moments don't ask for applause. Elves. This one asked for humility. Lily reached across her father and pressed her mismatched mitten into Victoria's hand. Elves. Victoria held it like a promise. Only then did the applause begin, slow, uneven, almost embarrassed at first, before it finally rose. Elves. Not for wealth, not for a well-run campaign, For the quiet dignity of a man who had changed a life from the shadows and never once asked the world to switch on a light to notice themselves. By the end of the evening, Preston Cole had quietly resigned his position, effective the following Monday, after two other members of the Foundation's board privately confirmed they had voiced concerns about his treatment of applicants and community partners over the preceding 3 years. Records later reviewed by the Foundation's legal counsel showed at least 3 prior incidents in which working-class recipients of Sinclair Vision Technologies grants had been dismissed, delayed, or quietly deprioritized under his direction, always under the language of protecting standards. When a local reporter later asked him for comment, Preston maintained that he had simply been following proper protocol, and that the diner had never been the appropriate venue for a moment of that magnitude. He offered no apology then or later. He did not attend the ribbon cutting 3 months afterward, though he was invited. 3 months later, the old brick schoolhouse on 6th Street reopened as the Hale Vision Center. It offered free eye exams, tutoring, winter coats, after-school meals, art classes, and quiet reading rooms, where children could sit without being rushed or judged by anyone. On opening morning, Daniel arrived before sunrise to help Nora set up folding chairs. He still wore the same mended jacket. He still drove the same blue pickup with the rusted fender. When a reporter asked why he hadn't moved into the larger house Victoria had offered to buy him, Daniel only smiled and said, "A bigger house doesn't make a man bigger. But a bigger table can feed more people." Victoria didn't try to rescue him from his life. She funded the center, protected his privacy, and kept showing up at the Lakeview Diner every Thursday evening, always sliding into the same last booth, always asking Lily what she'd drawn that week. Over time, the town stopped whispering about the billionaire and the diner regular. They noticed something better instead. The way Victoria laughed more easily now, the way Lily always saved her a seat without being asked, the way grief in Daniel's face had slowly made room for something gentler. Nothing about it was loud. It was simply respect becoming friendship, and friendship becoming the kind of trust that doesn't erase the past but learns to sit quietly beside it. Years later, visitors to the Hale Vision Center would pause at a small framed note near the entrance, written in Daniel's careful hand. "Some people don't change the world by standing above it. They change it by saving one seat." Beneath it, in Lily's handwriting, 3 smaller words had been added. "Sit with us." Because dignity never needs to shout, grace never needs applause. And kindness, given quietly enough, has a way of traveling through the dark, through years, through strangers, through storms, until one day it comes back around and pulls out a chair for you, too. If this story meant something to you tonight, tell us in the comments about a time someone saved a seat for you when you needed it most. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the quiet kind of courage that changes everything. To Glamour the Story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes only. All characters, names, businesses, and events depicted are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or dead, or any actual establishment. Any resemblance to real persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of human dignity, workplace ethics, and social justice through narrative storytelling. It does not make factual claims about any individual company or institution.